My name is Marcus Thompson, and I am 28 years old. I am sitting in my apartment in Seattle right now, watching the rain fall against the window, thinking about a night that changed everything. 3 years ago, I had a family. 3 years ago, I believed that if I tried hard enough, my parents would finally see me. 3 years ago, at their 30th wedding anniversary party, they proved me wrong in front of over 150 people. Before I share what happened, I want to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If this story touches you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own family? Stay with me because what I am about to tell you might sound familiar. Let me take you back to the beginning so you can understand how I ended up here 2,000 miles away from everything I once called home. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in a house that looked perfect from the outside. My father, Richard Thompson, was 58 years old and a successful lawyer at one of the biggest firms in the city. He was the kind of man who commanded every room he entered. He always wore perfectly tailored suits, spoke in a deep, authoritative voice, and expected nothing less than excellence from everyone around him. My father came from a working-class family. He put himself through law school, built his career from nothing, and he never let anyone forget it. He had a vision for his sons, a path he expected us to follow, and deviation from that path was not something he tolerated easily. My mother, Denise Thompson, was 55. She owned a high-end event planning company that catered to the wealthiest families in Columbus. She was beautiful, always impeccably dressed with perfect hair and perfect nails, and a perfect smile for every occasion. But beneath that polished exterior was a woman who cared more about image than emotion, more about what people thought than how her children felt. Everything in our house had to look right, even if nothing felt right. And then there was my younger brother, Brandon. He was 25, a final-year medical student at one of the most prestigious universities in the country. Brandon was what my parents called their golden child, though they never used those words out loud. They did not need to. Every look, every gesture, every conversation made it clear that Brandon was the son they had always wanted. Growing up, I always felt like I was running a race I could never win. I was a good student, but not excellent. I made the basketball team in high school, but I was not the star player. I had a talent for writing, and I even got a short story published in our school literary magazine when I was 16. I remember bringing the magazine home so excited to show my parents. My mother glanced at it and said that was nice, then asked if I had finished my math homework. My father never read it at all. But when Brandon brought home straight A report cards, my parents threw small celebration dinners. When Brandon got accepted into medical school, they announced it at every family gathering for months. The difference was so obvious that even relatives noticed, though no one ever said anything directly. I remember one Thanksgiving when I was 19. I had just received a B+ on a difficult economics exam, and I mentioned it at the dinner table, hoping for some acknowledgement. My father looked at me and asked why it was not an A. That same dinner, Brandon mentioned he was considering specializing in cardiology, and my parents spent the next hour discussing how proud they were and how he would be saving lives one day. I learned early that my accomplishments would never measure up, but I kept trying. I think part of me believed that if I just found the right achievement, the right moment, my parents would finally look at me the way they looked at Brandon. When it came time for college, I made a decision that disappointed them. I chose to study communications at Ohio State University instead of pursuing law or medicine like they wanted. My father told me I was wasting my potential. My mother said she just wanted what was best for me, but her tone made it clear she did not think I was capable of knowing what that was. Still, I held firm. It was the first time I had gone against their wishes, and it felt terrifying and liberating at the same time. After graduation, I got a job at a marketing firm in Columbus. The starting salary was modest, but I loved the work. I was good at it. I climbed from entry level to junior manager in just 2 years. But my parents never visited my office, never asked about my projects, never celebrated my promotions. When I told them I had been given my own team to lead, my mother asked if Brandon had called to tell them about his latest exam results. That was when I met Jenna Carter. She was 27, a first-grade teacher at an elementary school in the suburbs. We met at a coffee shop near my office. She was sitting alone grading papers, and something about the way she smiled at the barista made me want to know her. We talked for 3 hours that first day. She was warm, genuine, kind in a way that felt unfamiliar to me. She came from a middle-class family in Cleveland. Her parents were not wealthy or accomplished, but they loved her unconditionally. She had no idea what it felt like to be invisible in your own home. We dated for 2 years, and for the first time in my life, I felt seen. Jenna loved me for who I was, not for what I achieved or how I compared to someone else. She was my safe place. I brought her home to meet my parents once. Just once. My mother looked at Jenna and later told me she seemed a bit plain. My father asked Jenna what she did for a living, and when she said she was a teacher, he nodded and said that was a nice job for someone who did not want too much pressure. Jenna was gracious about it, but I could see the hurt in her eyes on the drive home. I apologized to her, and she held my hand and told me it was not my fault. Then came the invitation to my parents' 30th wedding anniversary party. My mother had been planning it for over a year. It was going to be the social event of the season held at the Grand Marriott in downtown Columbus. Over 150 guests were invited, including business partners, prominent families, relatives from across the country, and friends my parents had cultivated over 3 decades. It was not just a celebration of their marriage. It was a showcase of their success, their perfect life, their perfect family. Brandon and I were both asked to give speeches at the event. When my mother told me, something shifted inside my chest. This was my chance. For once, I would stand in front of everyone and speak about our family, and maybe finally my parents would see that I belonged too. I spent 3 weeks writing my speech. I revised it dozens of times, practiced it in front of the mirror, memorized every word. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted my parents to hear it and feel proud of me. I bought a new suit for the occasion, ordered a custom flower arrangement for my mother, and found a gift that I thought would mean something. It was a handcrafted wooden frame with their restored wedding photograph, along with a handwritten letter telling them how much their marriage had taught me about commitment and love. Jenna helped me practice. She listened to my speech at least 20 times and told me it was beautiful. She believed this would be a turning point. So did I. Looking back, I do not know if I was naive or just desperate. Maybe both. The night of the anniversary party arrived, and everything seemed perfect on the surface. The Grand Marriott ballroom was decorated like something out of a magazine. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting warm light across round tables draped in white linen. Fresh flowers in elegant vases sat at the center of each table. A jazz band played softly in the corner, and waiters in black vests moved gracefully through the crowd carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I arrived with Jenna at 7 in the evening. She wore a navy blue dress that made her eyes shine, and I had on the new charcoal suit I had bought specifically for this night. As we walked through the entrance, I felt a swell of pride. This was my family. This was where I belonged. I scanned the room for my parents and found them near the main stage, surrounded by a circle of guests. My mother wore a silver gown that sparkled under the lights, and my father stood beside her in a classic black tuxedo. They looked like royalty receiving their subjects. I approached them with Jenna ready to greet them and wish them a happy anniversary. But before I could reach them, they were pulled into conversation with a couple I recognized as partners from my father's law firm. My father saw me, gave a quick nod, and turned back to his conversation. My mother offered a brief smile and mouthed, "We will talk later," before returning her attention to her guests. I stood there for a moment, feeling the familiar sting of dismissal, but I told myself it was fine. This was their night. They were busy. It did not mean anything. Then Brandon arrived. He walked in 20 minutes after us, wearing a perfectly fitted navy suit, his hair styled like he had just stepped off a magazine cover. The moment my parents saw him, everything changed. My mother excused herself from her conversation and rushed over to embrace him. My father clapped him on the shoulder with a smile I rarely saw directed at me. They introduced him to the partners, immediately calling him our son, who was about to become a doctor. I watched from across the room, Jenna's hand in mine, and tried to ignore the tightness in my chest. We made our way through the crowd, greeting relatives and family friends. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's older sister, found me near the bar. She gave me a hug and asked when Jenna and I were getting married. Then she leaned in and whispered, "Hang in there, your parents expect a lot." I nodded, unsure of what to say. My Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother, approached us next. He shook my hand and asked what I did for work. When I told him I was a marketing manager, he raised his eyebrows and said, "Oh, is that right?" Then he mentioned that Brandon was about to finish medical school and added that my parents must be so proud. He did not say they were proud of me. Several guests asked Jenna and me questions about ourselves, but I noticed that many of them did not seem to know who I was. One woman, a friend of my mother's, asked if I was a cousin of the family. When I told her I was Richard and Denise's older son, she looked surprised and said, "Oh, I had no idea they had two boys." The dinner portion of the evening began, and we took our seats. Brandon was placed at table 1 directly next to my parents at the head of the room. Jenna and I were seated at table 7, near the back, between a distant cousin I had met once at a funeral and an elderly couple who were friends of my father's from his golf club. The meal was exquisite, but I barely tasted it. My mind was focused on the speeches that would come after dessert. I ran through my words, silently feeling the folded paper in my jacket pocket. This was my moment. Everything would change after tonight. When the plates were cleared, the master of ceremonies took the stage and announced that the sons of the anniversary couple would now share a few words. Brandon was called up first. He walked to the microphone with easy confidence, flashing a smile at the crowd. For the next 5 minutes, he delivered a speech that was charming, funny, and perfectly polished. He told stories about growing up with loving parents who always supported his dreams. He thanked them for their guidance, their sacrifice, their unwavering belief in him. The audience laughed at his jokes, nodded at his sentiments, and applauded warmly when he finished. My parents beamed from their seats, my mother wiping a tear from her eye. Then it was my turn. I stood up from table 7 and made my way to the stage. The walk felt longer than it should have. When I reached the microphone, I looked out at the crowd of faces, some familiar, most strangers. I found my parents at their table. My mother was adjusting her bracelet. My father was checking his watch. I began my speech. I talked about the strength of their marriage, the home they had built, the lessons I had learned from watching them navigate life together. I spoke about gratitude, about family, about love. The words flowed exactly as I had practiced them. About 2 minutes in, I was in the middle of a sentence when my mother stood up from her chair. She walked toward the stage, smiling at guests as she passed, and stepped up beside me. She touched my arm lightly and leaned into the microphone. "Thank you, Marcus," she said. "That was lovely, but we need to move on to the next part of the program, because we have several more presentations scheduled." I stared at her, the rest of my speech frozen on my tongue. The microphone clicked off in my hand. My mother gestured for me to step down, still smiling that perfect public smile. I walked off the stage in silence. Back at my table, Jenna reached for my hand. Her face was pale. "Are you okay?" she whispered. I nodded, but my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Brandon had been given 5 full minutes. I had been given 2. The evening continued with a slideshow presentation of my parents' life together. Photographs flashed across a large screen while soft music played. I watched image after image appear. Brandon as a baby, Brandon at his high school graduation, Brandon receiving academic awards, Brandon with my parents at various events, always smiling, always center frame. There were a few photos of me, a group shot at Christmas where I stood at the edge, a family portrait from years ago where I was partially blocked by my father's shoulder. Nothing individual, nothing that showed I had ever mattered. Jenna squeezed my hand under the table. I saw that she whispered. I nodded but could not speak. The slideshow ended to applause. My parents returned to their seats, accepting congratulations and compliments. I sat at table 7, invisible, wondering if anyone in the room even remembered I had been on that stage. After the slideshow, there was a brief intermission before the gift presentation ceremony. I used the opportunity to find my father and ask him about what had happened. He was standing near the bar with a group of men I recognized from his firm. As I approached, I heard him introducing Brandon to them. "This is my son, Brandon," he said with unmistakable pride. "He is finishing medical school this spring, going to be a cardiologist, top of his class." The men shook Brandon's hand and congratulated him. Then one of them noticed me standing nearby and asked who I was. My father turned to me. His expression shifted slightly, the enthusiasm dimming. "Oh, this is Marcus," he said. "My older son. He works at a marketing company." The way he said it made it sound like an afterthought. The men nodded politely, then returned their attention to Brandon. I waited until the group dispersed before approaching my father alone. I asked him why my speech had been cut short when Brandon had been allowed to speak for the full time. My father looked at me with mild irritation. "This is not the time, Marcus," he said. "Do not make this about you. Tonight is about your mother and me." He walked away before I could respond. I found my mother near the dessert table surrounded by her friends. She was laughing at something one of them had said, radiant and carefree. I waited for a break in the conversation, then approached. Mom, I said quietly, can I talk to you for a moment? She excused herself from her friends with an apologetic smile and stepped aside with me. What is it, Marcus? I asked her about the speech. I asked why she had interrupted me, why my time had been cut, why Brandon had received so much more. She sighed, her expression shifting to one of impatience. Your speech was running long, she said. I had to keep the program on schedule. Brandon is more comfortable with public speaking, so his portion was easier to manage. Do not be so sensitive about this. I felt my throat tighten. But you did not even let me finish. I worked on that speech for weeks. She patted my arm in a way that felt dismissive rather than comforting. I am sure it was fine, she said. Now please let us not create any drama tonight. Go enjoy the party. She returned to her friends, leaving me standing alone by a table covered in miniature cakes and chocolate truffles. Jenna found me a few minutes later and suggested we step outside for some air. We walked through the ballroom doors to a balcony overlooking the city. The night was cool, and the sounds of the party became muffled behind us. I told her what my parents had said. My voice was steady, but inside I felt like I was crumbling. Jenna listened without interrupting. When I finished, she took both of my hands in hers. Maybe they are just stressed with the event, she offered gently. Maybe tomorrow, when things calm down, you can talk to them properly. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation, that my parents were not intentionally treating me as lesser. But deep down, a voice I had been ignoring for years was getting louder. We returned to the ballroom for the gift presentation. My parents sat on two ornate chairs on the stage, while guests brought their gifts forward one by one. A microphone was set up so each giver could say a few words. When it was Brandon's turn, he presented an envelope. Inside were tickets for a 2-week trip to Europe, a tour through Paris, Rome, and Barcelona fully paid. My mother gasped and pressed her hand to her heart. My father stood and embraced Brandon warmly. They spent several minutes thanking him, expressing their joy, promising to send photos from every city. The audience applauded and murmured their appreciation. Then it was my turn. I carried my gift to the stage, the wooden frame with their restored wedding photograph and my handwritten letter inside. I had spent hours on that letter, pouring my heart into every sentence. My mother opened the wrapping, looked at the frame, and smiled politely. Oh, that is nice, she said into the microphone. Thank you, Marcus. She set it aside on a table with the other gifts and moved on to the next presenter. My letter was not read. My gift was not acknowledged further. It sat on that table forgotten, while the audience's attention shifted elsewhere. I returned to table 7 and sat down heavily. Jenna did not say anything. She just held my hand and let me sit with the weight of what had just happened. Later in the evening, I overheard a conversation from the table behind us. Two relatives I barely knew were talking in hushed voices. It is sad about Marcus, one of them said. He always seems so overlooked. The other responded. He is not ambitious like Brandon. Richard and Denise have high standards. I pretended not to hear, but every word carved itself into my memory. As the night continued, I found myself thinking about every moment like this that had come before. My high school graduation, where my parents arrived late and left early because my father had a work dinner. My 21st birthday, which they had forgotten entirely until Brandon reminded them 3 days later. The promotion I received last year that no one in my family acknowledged or asked about. This was not a single bad night. This was my entire life condensed into one evening, displayed before 150 witnesses. I looked at my parents across the room, laughing and accepting congratulations, basking in the glow of their celebration. They had no idea what they had done. Or maybe they knew and simply did not care. For 28 years, I had been waiting for them to see me. Sitting at table 7, surrounded by strangers who did not know my name, I realized they never would. The main program was drawing to a close. The band had shifted to slow music, and couples were beginning to drift onto the dance floor. Waiters circulated with coffee and petits fours. The atmosphere was warm and celebratory, full of laughter and clinking glasses. But I felt none of it. I sat at my table, Jenna beside me, watching my parents prepare for their final speech of the evening. They stood on the stage together, my father's arm around my mother's waist, looking every bit the picture of a perfect couple, celebrating 30 years of love. My father took the microphone first. He thanked everyone for coming, spoke about the journey of marriage, the sacrifices, the rewards. His voice was steady and confident, practiced from years of courtroom arguments and client presentations. The audience listened attentively, nodding along. Then, my mother spoke about family, about building a legacy, about the pride they felt watching their children grow. And then came the moment that shattered everything. "We are so proud of our sons," my mother said, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "Our Brandon is about to graduate from medical school. He is going to be a doctor, saving lives, making a real difference in the world. We could not be more proud of the man he has become." The audience applauded. Brandon stood briefly from table one, acknowledging the recognition with a humble wave. My mother continued, "And as for Marcus," she said, her tone shifting almost imperceptibly. I felt Jenna's hand tighten around mine. My father leaned into the microphone, taking over. "Marcus is our older son," he said. "He has taken a different path than we had hoped. Not everyone follows the road their parents envisioned for them. But we hope that one day he will find his way and make something meaningful of his life." My mother added with a small, sympathetic smile, "We love Marcus in our own way. He is just not quite where we expected him to be at this point. But there is still time." The room went silent for a moment. Then I heard scattered, uncomfortable murmurs. Someone at a nearby table coughed. A few people glanced in my direction with expressions I recognized immediately: pity, embarrassment, relief that they were not me. I sat frozen in my chair, unable to move, unable to breathe. My face burned. My ears rang. The words my parents had just spoken echoed in my head, repeating over and over. "Not quite where we expected him to be. We hope he will find his way. We love him in our own way." In front of 150 people, my parents had declared me a disappointment. Jenna's face had gone pale. She leaned close to me and whispered something, but I could not process her words. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears and the quiet hum of judgment from every table around us. I looked at Brandon. He was staring down at his plate, his jaw tight. He did not look proud. He looked uncomfortable. But he said nothing. He did not defend me. He did not correct them. He sat in silence and let it happen. I looked at Aunt Patricia. She shook her head slightly, but remained in her seat. Uncle Robert avoided my gaze entirely. No one spoke up. The master of ceremonies returned to the microphone, smoothly transitioning to announce the cake-cutting ceremony. The moment passed. The spotlight shifted. The crowd resumed their conversations as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened. 28 years of trying, 28 years of hoping, 28 years of waiting for my parents to look at me the way they looked at Brandon. And in one single speech, they had told the world exactly what they thought of me. I was not a success story. I was a cautionary tale. I was the son who had failed to meet their expectations, the evidence that not all children turn out the way you plan. I pushed back my chair and stood. Jenna stood with me, her eyes wide with worry. "Marcus, where are you going?" she asked. I did not answer. I walked away from the table, past the dance floor, past the stage where my parents were now posing for photographs with the anniversary cake. I did not look at them. I could not. As I passed the stage, my mother noticed me. "Marcus," she called out, "where are you going? The cake cutting is about to start." I kept walking. "Marcus," she said again, her voice sharper now. I pushed through the ballroom doors and stepped into the hotel corridor. The air was cooler here, quieter. I could hear my own heartbeat fast and heavy. Jenna caught up with me a moment later. She did not say anything. She just took my hand and walked beside me. We exited the hotel through the main entrance and stepped into the night. The valet asked if we needed our car. I nodded. As we waited, I stared at the city skyline, the lights of Columbus twinkling in the distance. This was my home. This was where I had grown up, where I had gone to school, where I had built my career. This was where my family lived. But standing there in the darkness, I realized it had never really been home. Home was supposed to be a place where you belonged, where you were loved unconditionally, where you did not have to prove your worth. This place had never given me that. Jenna squeezed my hand. "What do you want to do?" she asked softly. I did not answer right away. The valet brought our car, and we drove away from the Grand Marriott in silence. That night, I made a decision. I was done. The next morning, I woke up in my apartment with a clarity I had never felt before. My phone was filled with notifications, text messages from my mother asking where I had gone, and why I had not stayed for the cake. A missed call from Brandon. A message from Aunt Patricia checking if I was okay. Nothing from my father. I did not respond to any of them. Jenna made coffee, and we sat together at the small kitchen table, not speaking for a long while. Finally, she asked the question I knew was coming. "What are you thinking?" I told her the truth. I was thinking about leaving. Not just the party, not just the night. I was thinking about leaving Columbus, leaving my parents, leaving everything behind, and starting over somewhere they could not reach me. She listened without judgment. When I finished, she simply asked where I wanted to go. We talked about options, cities where my company had offices, places where we could build a new life together. After hours of discussion, we settled on Seattle. It was far enough away to feel like a fresh start, far enough that running into family at the grocery store would be impossible. Over the next week, I set my plan in motion. I submitted a transfer request to my company's Seattle branch. They approved it within days. My manager said they were excited to have me and that my work had impressed the regional leadership. It was validation I had never received from my parents. Jenna found a teaching position at an elementary school in the Seattle area. She handed in her notice at her current school with 2 weeks' warning. I put my apartment on the market. I sold most of my furniture. I packed my life into boxes and prepared to disappear. I did not tell my parents any of this. I did not call them. I did not visit. When they texted or called, I ignored them. 1 week before I was scheduled to leave, I ran into my mother at the supermarket. She was in the produce section examining avocados. She looked up and saw me, and her face shifted into an expression of surprise and mild irritation. "Marcus," she said, walking toward me, "why have you not been answering your phone? People have been asking about you since the party." I stood still, a basket of groceries in my hand, and looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who had raised me, who had shaped so much of who I was, who had made me feel invisible for as long as I could remember. I asked her a simple question. "Do you understand what you and Dad said about me at the party, in front of everyone?" She frowned, confusion flickering across her features. "What are you talking about? We were just being honest. You are too sensitive, Marcus. You always have been." I felt something harden inside me. "That is why I am leaving," I said. "And I will not be coming back." Her frown deepened. "Leaving? What do you mean?" I turned away from her and walked toward the checkout counter. Behind me, I heard her calling my name, but I did not stop. 3 days later, Jenna and I loaded our remaining belongings into a rental truck and drove out of Columbus at 6 in the morning. I did not leave a note. I did not say goodbye. I did not tell anyone where I was going. My parents found out I was gone when they tried to visit my apartment and discovered it had been sold. By then, I had already changed my phone number. On the interstate somewhere between Ohio and Indiana, Jenna asked me how I was feeling. I thought about it for a moment, then answered honestly. "I feel like I am finally free." Seattle was gray and rainy when we arrived, but something about the mist and the mountains felt right. It felt like a place where I could disappear and rebuild. Jenna and I rented a small apartment in Capitol Hill, a neighborhood full of coffee shops and bookstores, and people who did not know anything about Richard and Denise Thompson. Here I was not the disappointing son. I was just Marcus, a new transplant from the Midwest, starting fresh. The first few months were challenging. I threw myself into work, determined to prove my worth at the Seattle office. My new supervisor, Linda Hayes, was a sharp, observant woman in her 50s who noticed my dedication from the start. After my first major project, she called me into her office and told me she did not know where I came from, but she could see I had real potential. It was the first time someone in a position of authority had ever said that to me. Jenna settled into her teaching job quickly. She loved her students, and they loved her. We built routines together, exploring the city on weekends, finding favorite restaurants, making friends among our neighbors and coworkers. But the pain did not disappear just because I had changed locations. At night, I would sometimes lie awake hearing my father's voice in my head. "We hope he will find his way." I would remember my mother's dismissive smile, the way she had interrupted my speech, the way my gift had been set aside without a second glance. Jenna noticed the weight I was carrying. After 6 months in Seattle, she suggested I talk to a professional. I resisted at first, but eventually agreed to see a therapist named Dr. Angela Morrison. In her quiet office overlooking Puget Sound, I began unpacking 28 years of emotional neglect. Dr. Morrison helped me understand that what I had experienced had a name: emotional abandonment. She explained that some parents are incapable of providing unconditional love not because their children are unworthy, but because of their own limitations. I learned that I had spent my entire life seeking validation from people who were never going to give it. I learned that their inability to see my worth was not a reflection of my actual worth. I learned that healing would not come from changing them, but from changing how I saw myself. It was not easy. There were sessions where I cried for the entire hour. There were weeks where the grief felt unbearable. But slowly, I began to feel lighter. At work, I continued to excel. After my first full year in Seattle, I was promoted to senior manager. Linda told me I had exceeded every expectation she had, and that the company was lucky to have me. I thanked her, and I meant it more than she could have known. Jenna and I grew closer than ever. We had always been partners, but now we were building something entirely our own, without the shadow of my family hanging over us. After 2 years in Seattle, I proposed to her. We were at a park overlooking the water, the sun setting behind the Olympic Mountains. I told her that she had given me something I had never had before. She had shown me what it felt like to be loved, without conditions, without expectations, without having to earn it. I asked her if she would spend the rest of her life with me. She said yes. We got married in a small ceremony on the coast with only close friends and a few of Jenna's relatives in attendance. I did not invite anyone from my family. Brandon had sent me a few messages over the years through mutual acquaintances, but I never responded. My parents had not reached out at all. On our wedding day, I felt no absence. The people who mattered were there. The people who had proven their love through actions, not obligations. That was enough. Through an old college friend who still lived in Ohio, I occasionally heard updates about my family. Brandon had graduated and started his residency at a hospital in Cleveland. My parents continued hosting their elaborate social events, still presenting the image of the perfect family. Apparently, they told people I had moved away for work and left it at that. They did not mention that I had cut off all contact. They did not mention the anniversary party. In their version of events, nothing bad had ever happened. I did not correct the narrative. I did not care anymore. For the first time in my life, I was building an identity that was entirely my own. I was not Richard Thompson's disappointing son. I was not Brandon's overshadowed brother. I was just Marcus, a marketing manager, a husband, a man who had chosen his own path and found peace along the way. Dr. Morrison told me during one of our final sessions that healing was not about forgetting what had happened. It was about accepting it, learning from it, and refusing to let it define my future. I was learning how to do exactly that. 3 years after I left Columbus, I found myself sitting in our Seattle apartment on a rainy afternoon, watching the water droplets slide down the window glass. Jenna was beside me on the couch, her hand resting on her stomach. She was 5 months pregnant. In a few short months, we would become parents. The news of her pregnancy had brought a new layer of meaning to everything I had been through. I thought constantly about the kind of father I wanted to be. I made promises to myself. I would love my child unconditionally. I would never compare them to anyone else. I would celebrate their choices, whatever they were. I would make sure they always knew they were enough. A week earlier, something unexpected had arrived. Brandon had tracked me down through a college friend who still had my email address. He sent a letter forwarded digitally because he did not have my physical address. The letter was short. Our father had suffered a stroke. He was recovering, but the doctors said his mobility would be limited going forward. Brandon wrote that our father had been asking for me. He wanted to see me. I read the letter several times. I showed it to Jenna. We talked about it for hours. I asked myself what I actually wanted, not what was expected of me, not what would look right or avoid conflict. What did I, Marcus, want? The answer was clear. I did not want to go back. I did not hate my parents. I had spent enough time in therapy to release most of the anger, but I also did not owe them my presence. They had spent my entire life showing me where I ranked in their hearts. I did not need to keep offering myself up for more of the same. I wrote a letter to Brandon. I told him I was sorry to hear about our father's health. I genuinely hoped he would recover, but I could not return. I had spent 28 years waiting for our parents to see me, and I could not spend another moment chasing something that was never going to come. I wished them all well, but my life was here now. I had built something good, something healthy, and I needed to protect it. I sent the letter and felt no regret. The weeks that followed were filled with preparation for the baby. Jenna and I painted the nursery, assembled furniture, attended parenting classes. We talked about names, about values, about the family we wanted to create. One evening, Jenna asked me if I ever thought about what I would say to my parents if they suddenly showed up at our door, ready to apologize, ready to change. I considered the question carefully. Then, I told her the truth. If they came with a genuine apology, a real acknowledgement of what they had done, I would listen. I would not close the door on the possibility of healing, but I also knew that an apology would not erase the past. It would not undo the years of feeling invisible. It would not give me back the childhood I deserved. And even if they never apologized, I had already found what I needed. I had a wife who loved me. I had a career that fulfilled me. I had friends who valued me for who I was. I had made peace with myself. Their approval was no longer necessary. There is a quote I came across during one of my therapy sessions. It said that you can love someone and still choose to say goodbye. You can miss a person every day and still be glad they are no longer in your life. That was where I had landed. I loved the idea of the parents I wished I had. I missed the family I had always dreamed of having. But I was glad I had walked away because walking away had saved me. On a quiet afternoon, I sat down at my laptop and began writing. I wanted to share my story not for sympathy, but because I knew there were others out there who felt the same invisible ache I had carried for so long. I wrote about growing up in the shadow of a golden sibling. I wrote about the small cuts that accumulate over years. I wrote about the anniversary party, the moment everything changed. I wrote about leaving without a goodbye, about rebuilding in a new city, about finding love and purpose and peace. When I finished, I posted it on a blog I had started anonymously. I did not expect much response, but within days, messages started coming in from strangers who recognized themselves in my words, people who had also felt unseen by their families, people who had also struggled with the decision to walk away, people who thanked me for putting into words what they had felt but could not articulate. I realized then that my story was not just mine. It belonged to everyone who had ever been made to feel not enough by the people who were supposed to love them most. Sitting in my apartment, now watching the rain, I think about everything that has happened and everything that is still to come. In a few months, I will hold my child for the first time. I will look into their eyes and make a promise. I will tell them that they are loved exactly as they are. I will tell them that their worth is not measured by achievements or comparisons or anyone else's expectations. I will tell them that they will always have a safe place with me. And I will mean every word, because I know what it feels like to grow up without that. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure my child never does. Do my parents ever think about me? Do they regret what happened? Do they understand why I left? I do not know. And I have made peace with not knowing. What I do know is that I am no longer waiting for their answers. I am no longer waiting for their approval. I am no longer waiting for them to see me. I see myself now. And that is enough. If you are watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, I want you to hear something. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are not less than. The people who were supposed to love you may have failed, but that failure does not define your worth. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be loved without conditions. And if the people in your life cannot give you that, you have every right to walk away and find people who can. Building a new life is not easy. Letting go of the hope that things will change is painful, but on the other side of that pain is freedom. Real, genuine, soul-deep freedom. I found mine, and I believe you can find yours. Before I go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you ever had to make the painful choice to walk away from people you loved? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. Your experiences matter, and this community is a place where we can support each other. If this video resonated with you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss future stories. And remember, no matter what you have been through, you are worthy of love and belonging. Thank you for listening to my story. I wish you healing, peace, and the courage to choose yourself. Take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next one.